Okay, so today we're going to cover Sadharana Dharma, and we're also going to do some more interpreting the Gita through the lens of the Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. We'll see how much. I posted 10 shlokas to the group. I don't know if we'll get through all of them, but we will try. So, there are three lenses through which we can look at the Bhagavad Gita. And using these three lenses will help us get, first of all, to understand the Bhagavad Gita. It will help us understand the Bhagavad Gita, and it will give us the proper understanding of the shlokas as we read the Bhagavad Gita through these three lenses. One is, of course, we spend a lot of time on, which are the Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. These are actually the most important. This is the most important lens through which to see the Bhagavad Gita, because it translates the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita into our lives, right? Because the purpose of the Purusharthas are to deal with, to help the human being live a successful human life. So to look at the Bhagavad Gita through the lens of the Purusharthas is key. Now we go to what's called Sadharana Dharma. Sadharana means universal. In the first segment, the first way of looking through the Bhagavad Gita in terms of Dharma, we focused a lot on Svadharma, right? So there's four people here. Each of us have four completely different Svadharmas, if you will, right? The Svadharma of each one of us is completely different from the other, completely unique, completely individualized to each and every one of us. And that's for every human being on the face of the planet. That's the very nature of Swadharma, unique. Sadharana Dharma is just the opposite. Sadharana means it's applicable to all human beings. It is not only applicable, it is essential. It is it is what separates the human being from the animal species, right? So let's talk about these four. The Sadharana Dharmas has four principles. Give me a moment while I share my screen. Actually, I don't want to share the screen because that actually causes difficulty in the video. I will send forward the PDF into the WhatsApp group, so you'll have it there. I will read them. So the Sadharana Dharma has four principles, four concepts. Find them throughout. We find them listed throughout Vedic literatures. They're in the Ramayana. Ram is said to be known for the fact that he lived his life in strict adherence to and strict uh, accord with the Sadharana Dharma. We see them, they're listed in the Mahabharata numerous times. They come up in the Bhagavad Gita a number of times. They come up in the various Puranas numerous times. So in the Mahabharata, there's a shloka, Tapasa Satyamacharya Sauchena Dhayayatata Dharmam Yo Anupalipsat Sadharmam Veda Nanyata. This is Bhishma. He's relaying these principles of Sadharana Dharma. One who follows austerity, truth, purity, and compassion truly understands Dharma. No one else can understand Dharma. This comes in the Shanti Parva. So Bhishma is saying austerity, truthfulness, cleanliness, and compassion. In the Bhagavad Purana, Parikshit Maharaj, the grandson of Arjuna, he echoes the very same thing. He says, Tapa Socham Daya Satyam. Tapa is that austerity or self-mastery. Shocha is purity or cleanliness. Daya is compassion. And Satyam is, of course, truthfulness. So Parikshit Maharaj says, Tapa Socham Daya Satyam iti pada krite kritaha adharmam shais trayobhagna smaya sangha madhaistava. In the Parikshit Maharaj is talking to Dharma. Dharma has taken the form of a bull and is suffering. And Parikshit Maharaj is speaking to Dharma. He says, in the age of Satya, your 4 legs were established by the 4 principles of Dharma. And then he lists austerity, purity, truthfulness, and compassion. And he says, Parikshit Maharaj, but it appears that 3 of your legs are broken due to rampant adharma. So it's described in that area of the Bhagavad Purana that the last leg that is being assaulted, the last leg standing and being assaulted in this age of Kali Yuga is truthfulness, and it's wobbling. It's not going very well, to put it simply, until there is a resurgence and the reestablishing of Dharma. And this is why Krishna then comes in the Bhagavad Gita, right? Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyuttara adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Krishna says, whenever and wherever there is a decline in Dharma, at that point, I come and I appear to reestablish the principles of Dharma. These are those principles of Sadharana Dharma. So the 4 principles of Sadharana Dharma are Tapa, which means austerity or self-mastery. This means having complete mastery of the 13 aspects of the material, of the physical body, of the living entity, right? They are the 5 working senses. We talked about this before. The 5 working senses, arms, legs, so on and so forth. The 5 knowledge acquiring senses, eyes, ears, tongue, and so forth. And the 3 subtle, mind, intelligence, and ego. Tapa means having self-mastery of all 13. That is tapa, to have that self-mastery, that self-control of all 13. Then there is shocha. So shocha means purity, cleanliness. Not only to be clean in body and in the environment in which we live, but this purity is talking about purity from the Arisha Dvargas. That's internal purity. External purity is easy to understand, keeping personal hygiene, so on and so forth. Internal purity is purity relating to our motivations. In other words, why are we doing the things that we're doing? That is what must be purified. If we're under the control and the dictates of the Arisha Dvargas, our motivations for doing the things that we do become tainted or impure, toxic. So internal purity means purifying our motivations, the why we do the things we do, that we have to acknowledge. First of all, we have to understand. If we're motivated from fear, if we're motivated from lust, if we're motivated by anger, these things are considered impure motivations. The pure motivation is sattvic. Krishna talks about extensively in the Bhagavad Gita. Pure motivation is, we know from Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, pure motivation is to achieve moksha, freedom. That's pure motivation. And then, beyond that, connection with the Supreme. So those are the motivations. Connecting with our spiritual source, our spiritual nature, is that freedom. And in that connection, the relationship with the Supreme. That's the overriding, that should be the motivation. That is shocham, that is pure motivation. Then tapa, shocha, daya. There is compassion. There's compassion for ourselves. There's compassion for other living entities. Very easy to understand, but is a little more nuanced in the way the Vedic literatures talk about compassion. I was considering last night when I was preparing for this morning's class how deep to go into compassion, because it can really, that's a session in and of itself. Compassion, and it touches on the Vedic understanding of leadership as well. And I resolved to do as brief an explanation on compassion as possible, because I really want to spend time interpreting Bhagavad Gita shlokas. So compassion, remember we talked about kshetra and kshetragya, material reality and our spiritual identity. Compassion means seeing and recognizing another person's physical reality, but not removed from their spiritual identity. So what does this look like? All right. So for example, my wife and I, we are spending some time donating to a local food bank. That's very nice because it deals with the physical reality of a person's life. But then the question comes, how do my wife and I show compassion for their spiritual identity? In other words, how are we helping them reconnect with their spiritual nature? That's a much more difficult proposition, right? How do I help them connect to their spiritual identity? What I can do is I can make sure I'm not causing more bondage and I do this by making sure that everything I donate, at least, is offered to the Supreme. I put it I have a little altar in our house here. I offer it to the Supreme, get the blessings of Radha Krishna, and I make sure that the food itself is sattvic. I do not donate, meat products and so on, because at least there is the least amount of karma is involved in those donations, because we know karma is more binding to the soul. So this is how the not necessarily the devotee, but the individual, the yogi, practices, I wouldn't say the dharmatma, the person who's following the principles of dharma. This is how we practice compassion. We recognize a physical reality, not removed from their spiritual identity. And the purpose of the spiritual identity is to reconnect with the Supreme. So we do not, the least we can do is make sure we're not adding to their karmic bondage in any way, shape, or form. There's much more to that, but that was enough to suffice to define compassion. Then there is truthfulness. Krishna really describes quite nicely in the Bhagavad Gita the nature of truthfulness, and he gives truthfulness, satyam, as having three components. They are hitam, priyam, and arjavam. Arjava means basic honesty, right? I relate, this is a book, right? As far as I know, this is factually, as far as I know, this is a book, right? I'm making a factual statement. In as much as I know, this is a book. I don't know it as anything else. So I relate the factual statement. This is a book. That's arjavam, stating the facts. Then there is priyam. Priya means dear, right? So I state the facts in a way that is pleasing. This is a book. I don't shout at you. I don't curse you while I'm saying, this is a book. You have to beep out the rest of the sentence, right? I say, no, this is a book, in a very pleasing, palatable way that you can understand or can accept. And then there is hitam. Hitam means beneficial. Hita means I state this as a book, but my motivations, again, coming back to motivations, is to offer you this book as a present, right? My motivations are beneficial to all involved. I'm not trying to manipulate. I'm not trying to cause any further harm or in any way harm you. So that's truthfulness. Statements that are factual, arjvam, priyam, they're easy to hear, and hitam, they're beneficial. I have the genuine well-being of the other person in mind. If any one of those three components are not there, then that's actually considered a lie. It's not considered truthfulness. Mm-hmm. So the Dharmatma practices truthfulness. When we come to the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 16, verses 1 through 3, and I'm going to read, there's 3 shlokas there. I'm going to read just the translation to those 3 shlokas. And in those 3 shlokas, Krishna describes the characteristics of so-called sattvic, persons who are following the principles of Dharma. He calls them sattvic individuals. These are those qualities. Krishna says, fearlessness, purification of one's existence, cultivation of spiritual knowledge, charity, self-control, performance of yajna, sacrifice, study of the Vedas, austerity, simplicity, nonviolence, truthfulness, freedom from anger, renunciation, tranquility, aversion to criticizing, compassion for all living entities, freedom from covetousness, gentleness, modesty, steady determination, vigor, forgiveness, fortitude, cleanliness, and freedom from envy and from the passion for honor. These transcendental qualities, O son of Bharat, belong to godly individuals endowed with divine nature. So this comes from chapter 16, verses 1 through 3. And once again, we see those 4 fundamental principles of Sadharana Dharma. Austerity, truthfulness, compassion, and cleanliness are included in that list. That list is extensive, but those 4 fundamental principles, pillars of Sadharana Dharma, are also included. So I'm going to include, that's document I'll forward into both our Google Classroom with all the Sanskrit verses, so you have the references of Sadharana Dharma, and I'll send the PDF to the WhatsApp and to the classroom. Any questions on Sadharana Dharma? So, if I may, you can always feel free to interject anytime you want. So, seeing the Bhagavad Gita through the principles of Sadharana Dharma, now we know when Krishna says in the 4th chapter, I come to reestablish the principles of Dharma, what is he talking about? Krishna's talking about Sadharana Dharma. That's what he's come to reestablish, Sadharana Dharma. A lot of times people I'll rephrase this, that sometimes the interpretation of what Dharma is Krishna trying to establish. And how shall I say this? This is the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna has not yet deeply gone into spiritual practices. He's really talking about how to remember the Bhagavad Gita spoken on a battlefield. What time is it? I'm going to finish this segment so we can go on to verses of the Gita. The 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is the very beginning of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is still explaining Arjuna how he can live in this world. A lot of the 3rd chapter, Krishna is dealing with the principles of artha, right? Making a living and living in this world. He's talking about karma, the types of activities and occupations are necessary for, and how to engage in occupations in order to move towards moksha. he comes to the fourth chapter. At the end of the third chapter, Krishna begins to talk a little bit about spirituality, as we would call it. And he says, I've explained this principles of spirituality long before, and also these principles of Dharma long before. And Arjuna says, when? Krishna says, whenever there is a Dharma in the world, I come to reestablish Dharma. He's talking about Sadharana Dharma. However, because at the end of the third chapter, Krishna has touched on spirituality and becoming free from lust, and he's including some spiritual principles. Oftentimes, when he says, I've come to reestablish Dharma, it's interpreted that Krishna's talking about spiritual Dharma, right? We talked about Jiva Dharma, the eternal Dharma of the soul. And while that's not entirely wrong, Krishna is more specifically talking about Jiva Dharma or Sanatana Dharma later on in the Bhagavad Gita. Sanatana Dharma is always the end goal, is always the ultimate Dharma to be established. Absolutely, we're not taking away from that. But early on in the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna is talking about Dharma, he's talking about Dharma as it relates to Sadharana Dharma, these four principles, and as it relates to Dharma, as it relates to Svadharma, the individual, unique Dharma of the person. Krishna goes much later into Dharmamrita, and we'll talk about that next week. Dharmamrita is when it's very, very spiritually oriented, right? When Sanatana Dharma. Dharmamrita is Sanatana Dharma. That comes much later in the Bhagavad Gita. We'll talk about that next week. Okay, so let's pull up some verses from the Gita, and let's practice understanding and seeing verses through the lens of Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Give me a moment. Okay, I've taken these verses from in the middle of chapter 2. Pull it up onto my screen. Krishna says here, thus far I have described this knowledge to you through analytical study, or Sankhya. Now listen as I explain it in terms of working without fruitive results. O son of Pritha, when you act in such knowledge, you can free yourself from the bondage of works. I'd like each of you to have a go at interpreting this. Who would like to go first?
I think this is moksha, Mahaji, because it talks about free yourself from the bondages of work.
Very good. Others?
Mahaji Vidushi, I think this is, I agree, moksha also, but I also think it's artha, because we are working, but without the bondage of the fruit. So that's how I took it.
Very good. Others? I think there's one more with us here. Yes, there's 4 persons. Who's the other iPhone person?
I think too, it is moksha.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's without the bondages.
Mm-hmm.
So when you don't have them, it's easier to achieve that.
Very good. Very good. Yes, this is a moksha verse. Vidushi makes a very good point because Krishna does, oh no, Krishna does point out, he's going to say, now I'm going to explain in terms of working without fruitive results. So there's a touch of artha in there as well, because artha is about, making a living and a livelihood. But it's a moksha. The verse is about moksha because Krishna will explain how one can free oneself from the bondage of works. So it's definitely 100% a moksha verse. But it has Krishna references artha very briefly because he's going to explain how that can be done through artha or how artha leads to moksha. Very good on all counts. Excellently done. Let's go to the next one. In this endeavor, Krishna is talking about the progress towards moksha. In this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. I may have just given it away, but can all of you chime in, please?
This is moksha, but I think like you already gave it from the endeavor. The endeavor he's talking about the moksha, but the second half of it, I think it's the dharma.
Very nice. I like that. Next.
I agree with Canon, it's moksha. But I like his way also, like little bit dharma.
That's very good. Very nice. Is that bhavana?
Yes.
Very good.
So I feel it's more with dharma, and there's a little bit of artha because he's talking also about the fear.
Very good.
So when you have the fears, you are still here. You are not yet on the path of the moksha.
Right. Yes. Very good. Yes, it's a moksha combined. It's a moksha. He's talking about it's about moksha because Krishna is saying in this way, on this path, there's no loss, there's no diminution, it protects from fear. But these issues a lot of the issues are dharma issues. There are, the fears that come. Well, the most greatest type of fear is not the greatest type of fear is defined by Vedic philosophy and by Sankhya. And that's another reason I think I mentioned before why Sankhya is an important part. I didn't want to go off. Let's all right. The most greatest type of fear in Sankhya is to take birth in an animal body. I'm just going to throw it out there real quickly because we've run out of time. The greatest type of fear in Sankhya means to be born in a non-human body, because in a non-human body, you lack the choice to progress towards moksha. So that's the definition of the most dangerous type of fear in Sankhya. A lot of the Bhagavad Gita, when we have all these references to things, Krishna is referencing Sankhya philosophy. He's just assuming that Arjuna, well, he knows that Arjuna knows Sankhya. So whenever there's something comes up, we're not quite sure what he's referring to, go back to Sankhya, and that will explain what Krishna is getting at. The most dangerous type of fear in Sankhya is to be born in a non-human body because you lose choice. So yes, this is a dharma, it's a moksha verse because it's talking about moving towards this, in this endeavor, coming from the previous verse, endeavor towards moksha. Any advancement on this path towards moksha delivers us from the most dangerous type of fear. The dharma aspect comes in, and many of you are right to point that out, is because dharma, whether it's the sweat dharma or any other type, all these types of dharma, the purpose of all these dharmas are to make sure we can remain able to move towards moksha. We don't want to lose a human form of life, right? So we always want to make sure we're established in Dharma, we're practicing Dharma, because if we lose, if we do not engage in dharma, the possibility of us falling into the animal species becomes greater. So yes, there is a Dharma element as well. Let's do at least two more before I let us go. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. Let's have a go at this.
This is moksha.
Indeed, yes. Anyone else?
Moksha, Mahaji.
Very good. Bhavna?
I also agree with this, moksha.
Moksha. Absolutely, it's definitely moksha. He's talking about moksha on this path, so on and so forth. There's a little bit of, what's interesting here is a little bit of karma here, because Krishna describes what is an obstacle. And remember, karma is those impetus, those impulses that stem from the five working senses, the five knowledge acquiring senses, and mind, intelligence, and ego, right? So remember, karma, in dealing with karma, we want to have mastery of our five working senses, mastery of our five knowledge acquiring senses, and mastery of our mind, intelligence, and ego. So there's a touch of karma here. Krishna is saying, you're on this path, but it's essential that your intelligence is mastered. So there's a touch of karma here in relation to getting us to moksha. Let's do one more. Oh, this is a double verse. Persons of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to heavenly planets, resultant good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification and opulent life, they say that there is nothing more than this. Let's have a go at this.
This is kama, Mukaji, I think.
Yes. Others?
Kama and moksha, I think.
Mm-hmm. Others? Bhavna?
I think karma and swadharma.
Very good. Very good. Yes. It's definitely, it's a moksha in the sense that Krishna is talking about in general, moving towards moksha. But it's primarily a karma verse because it's dealing with these obstacles. It's dealing with these obstacles to karma, which are being attracted by sense gratification, good, all these wonderful things. It's karma. It's very, very much a karma verse. Bhavna mentions swadharma, and I see where you're going with that. But I see where you're going with that in the sense that we have a life and we're trying to achieve, or we're trying to experience the best part of our own lives, and fulfill and reach our highest potential through the study of the Vedas, engaging in all kinds of fruitive activities to manifest our best life. So in that sense, yes, it's swadharma. But in relation to the purusharthas, dharma, artha, kama, moksha, this is very much indeed a kama verse. As Krishna is saying, if we don't have our kama together, if we don't have our five working senses, five knowledge acquiring senses, mind and intelligence fixed, then we are distracted by issues of sense gratification, opulent life. We use the Vedas to get this opulent life, and we miss the point. So we'll end there. We'll practice some more interpreting the Bhagavad Gita next week as well. While we then also, we'll do two things next week. We will practice more interpreting the Bhagavad Gita, and we'll also go over these three lenses, right? We did Sadharana Dharma, Tapa Socha Daya Satyam. We're going to go now to Dharmatma. This is the third lens through which we see the Bhagavad Gita. Anything to share before we end? Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Jasvina Vadhitamastuma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I will upload everything to our classroom and the WhatsApp group. Hari Hari.
Hari Hari Maji.